Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grandline's Online Salon. I'm Roma, a communication coach from Grandline, Philippines. I'm so excited to introduce to you my partner, our guest MC for today, Miss Florence Rivera. Hi, Miss Florence. Miss Florence is a graduate from University of the Philippines, and she's a former general manager and core founder of 51 Talk Philippines, and was also the former director of human resources at Go Fluent. She is also the board director of National Association of Independent Travel Agencies, or known as NITAS, and at the same time, she is the founder and CEO of Travelbug Philippines. Hi, Miss Florence.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Roma. Thank you for having me. And just like you, Ms. Roma, I'm very excited to start our discussion of today's online salon.
Oh, totally, Miss Florence. The feeling is mutual. In this program, we feature several social issues that will allow the speakers to share their expertise. The students who are also part of the audience will have a fair share of questions at the end of the discussion.
We will be asking them about the main topic, and at least two speakers will be given time to state their points. Just a friendly reminder, kindly set your microphone on mute unless it's your turn to speak. Thank you for your cooperation. In 1948, the United Nations General Assembly set a common standard for all peoples and all nations. It sets out, for the first time, fundamental human rights to be universally protected, and we now know this document as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. One of the rights enshrined in Article 19 protects our freedom of expression, and I quote, "Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers."
I totally agree with you, Ms. Florence. And this right to freedom of expression and information is the foundation of broadcast law. These laws and regulations pertain to radio stations and TV stations, as well as related services like cable TV and radio, satellite TV and radio. Broadcasting is by far the most important source of information and entertainment, as well as, of course, for the most people around the world. And there are differences, however, in every country as to how they regulate broadcasts and media.
Exactly, Ms. Roma. In Japan, for example, media is basically governed by the Broadcast Act, the Telecom Act, the Radio Act, and the Wire Telecommunications Act, regulated by the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications. Whereas in the Philippines, broadcasting networks require a congressional franchise to operate television and radio stations. Very recently, one of the country's oldest and most influential media network, ABS-CBN, was issued a cease and desist order. Their congressional franchise expired on May 4, and the network was forced to temporarily stop its broadcast by the National Telecommunications Commission, or NTC. The order covers 42 television stations operated by ABS-CBN, including the main ABS-CBN network, 10 digital broadcast channels, 18 FM stations, and 5 AM stations. However, ABS-CBN news channel, and its online properties were allowed to continue as their operations are not contingent on the franchise.
Exactly. And this tormented public outcry of shutting down the country's biggest broadcasting network met a widespread criticism and indignation by various advocacy groups, business organizations, universities, the church, or even some members of Congress. Several journalists and celebrities from the network and its rivals expressed solidarity with ABS-CBN. The hashtag No to ABS-CBN Shutdown topped the local and worldwide Twitter trending lists the same day.
So we have a very hot topic today, Ms. Roma. In today's discussion, let's talk about the legal facts surrounding this issue. And okay, sorry, I have some technical issues here.
Okay, so in our today's discussion, we will be talking about legal facts behind the ABS-CBN shutdown. So our discussion will focus on the legal aspects of freedom of expression and broadcasting regulations using ABS-CBN as a case study. Our guests are experts on their own fields, but broadcast regulation is not their focus. However, they will share their knowledge to help us understand the basic legalities of the matter. Let's start by introducing our esteemed speakers. Now, let's have our first speaker. It's my honor to welcome our first guest speaker, Attorney Arnel de la Rosa. He graduated from Arellano University, and he is an independent member of Moores, Rowland and Company Philippines, a network of professionals and firms in the Philippines. He also provides a wide range of services in accounting, taxation, immigration, civil and criminal litigation, and real estate transactions. Again, let's welcome Attorney Arnel de la Rosa. Hi, sir. Hi, Attorney.
Hi, good afternoon. I am very honored to be a guest speaker and to be able to share my knowledge about the subject matter for discussion this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney.
Thank you, Attorney Arnel, and I'm sorry about that, Roma. I had technical issues. Let me introduce our second speaker for the day. So we have Attorney Chikashi Kaneko. He graduated from Osaka City University Law School. He joined the GVA Law Office in Tokyo and provides legal services for companies, including startups, IT companies, and listed companies. He supports the establishment of legal compliance systems, financing, and M&A. He established GVA TNY Consulting Philippines Incorporated in Manila, and he is now the representative director of GVA TNY Consulting Philippines Incorporated. Let's welcome Attorney Chikashi Kaneko. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon. Nice to meet you, everyone. It's my honor to discuss with you, everyone. Let's enjoy the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Kaneko. And let's also welcome the official fans club representative of Ms. Kimchu, Mr. Joey Pasqua, and Mr. Danilo Santiago. We will have them later during our Q&A session. But for now, please enjoy the session.
Welcome, everyone. So some groups and personalities, Ms. Roma, claim that the ABS-CBN shutdown is an attack on freedom of expression. To enlighten the minds of our audience, let's ask our guests for today to discuss the first question. What is freedom of expression and why is it important? Attorney Arnel, would you like to start?
Let me start by stating what the Constitution provides about the subject matter. Under the Bill of Rights, under Article 3, Section 4 of the 1987 Constitution, it provides, no law shall be passed abridging the freedom of speech, of expression, or the press, or the right of the people to peacefully assemble and petition the government for redress of grievances. Sorry for that. Now, if you would notice, the Constitution did not actually define what is this freedom of expression. Okay? There's no definition mentioned in the Constitution. But the universal understanding about this freedom of expression is that it is the right of the people to express or articulate their opinion publicly without fear of retaliation, without fear of censorship or subsequent punishment. Okay? It is a right which allows people to speak freely without unnecessary or any kind of interference from the government. The lack of definition, I would say, is a manifestation how infinite and how important the scope of this freedom of expression is. Now, why is it very important? it is said that this freedom of expression is the bedrock of all other rights, all human rights. Because how would you be able to assert your other rights if you cannot even speak freely, right? Okay. And there are some other importance of this right. How would people be made aware of what's happening in their surrounding if we have no news, correct? How would people be informed of the qualifications of the public officers during election if we are not informed, if there's no public debate? And a lot more, okay? And a lot more. So, and it is the foundation of other rights like the freedom of the press, because if the press is restrained or restricted on their news, how could we be made fully aware of what's happening or what's the real score on about the news? Investigative journalism, in case of investigative journalism, freedom of the press is very important to uncover truth, no? So it's really very important. And it is also a platform, I would say, to promote other advocacy, like the LGBT, for example. Their advocacies are being promoted through their expression. No, they organize rallies, for example, to promote their advocacies. Okay, so for example, in case of human right advocacies, how would, in case of human right abuses, how does anyone how would a person know about the abuse if no one will speak about it?
Exactly.
Like that is freedom of expression. Okay, now going back to the Constitution, again, it is not defined, but it's not even a grant. No, it is not even a grant of right to us. It is already inherent to us. It is our birthright. Okay, it coexists with us. And the Universal Declaration that you mentioned is a recognition that that is a fundamental right. Okay, it is not a grant, but that provision under the Constitution is actually a guarantee. No, it's a protection against abuses, no, against restraint. Okay, and the guarantee or the restraint mentioned here, there are two types: no? Prior restraint and subsequent punishment, as we studied in law school, so that the speaker should be able to freely express himself without any restraint, no, without any censorship, even prior to utterance, to his utterance of that speech. And also, he must be free from punishment for any subsequent punishment for whatever utterances or for whatever for the speech that he just made. Okay, so that's that's the limitation as provided under the Constitution. Of course, just like any other right, this right to free expression is not an absolute right. Okay, we cannot just we are given this freedom to speak, but we cannot just speak. There is a limitation. Okay, and for example, libel. No, we cannot just speak about libelous articles. No, we cannot impute malicious. We cannot make malicious imputations towards any other person. That's libelous. Okay? How is it covered? No, you might ask. Fake news. Okay? It's a protected speech. Actually, fake news is a protected speech as long as that fake news does not endanger public order. Okay, once that fake news endangers public order, that is punishable under the revised penal code. And even if the well, the revised penal code of the Philippines is a very old law, no? But that also covers online fake news because it is a publication. It's a written form. Okay. Now,
So the limitations to
so
freedom of
those
expression.
are now one other point is the freedom of expressions spoke or symbolic words, no? So symbolic expressions like, how you dress, how you style your hair, diba? And you see in some public assembly, some would wear uniform, diba? Some would wear all red, some would wear armband, black armband. That's a symbolic speech, and it also covers movies, theaters, you know, uh, whatever TV shows, for example. So those are coverage of this freedom of expression.
Okay. Well, thank you, Attorney Arnel, for a very comprehensive explanation of freedom of expression, its limitations and penalties, right, if abused. Now let's hear the perspective of Attorney Kaneko. Attorney, in Japanese law, what is freedom of expression and why is it important?
Okay, so please, could you open my slide?
There you go. Yeah.
Okay, so as Attorney Arnel said, the freedom of expression is already an international doctrine. It's Japanese constitution is very similar to the Philippines constitution. First of all, I would like to discuss the provision of the constitution. Article 21 of the Constitution stipulates that freedom of expression is secured. Article 13 guarantees the constitutional right to freedom of expression as long as the exercise of the human right does not interfere with the public welfare. Also, Article 98 stipulates that any act or law of legislation, administration, or justice that violates the Constitution will be null and void. In summary, freedom of expression, including freedom of the press or any other kind of expression, are guaranteed as long as they do not interfere with the public welfare. Therefore, laws and acts of administration infringing such rights are held unconstitutional and are finally null and void.
Okay. So is freedom of expression, Attorney, absolute in Japan? What are the restrictions and limitations?
Okay, so next page. Okay. So let's discuss about what public welfare means. The right to freedom includes external acts when the people exercise their right, and the exercise of the right to freedom involves relationship with others and society in nature. So making an adjustment with freedom of others is necessary. Therefore, the exercise of the right to freedom is not guaranteed absolutely and unconditionally. The exercise of the right to freedom is subject to certain restrictions. This restriction is called public welfare. Specifically, it is necessary to consider many aspects comprehensively, such as the importance of the right to freedom, the necessity of regulation, the degree of restriction, and the rationality of regulation to judge whether the act of the state is unconditional or constitutional.
Okay. So if it poses a threat to public welfare, then it is a violation of freedom of expression. Am I correct, Attorney?
Yeah, correct.
So it's very similar to the Philippines, right?
Yes, it's very similar.
Okay. What about fake news, Attorney Kaneko? Is that something that happens in Japan also?
It's very difficult question, and it's not tested by the court and judgment.
Okay.
But in my opinion, the fake news is not fact, right? So the value of expression is lower than the fact expression. So government don't have to care about the fake news. So it's easier to regulate them. It's just in my opinion.
Okay. Are there any violations for such, or just the government just leaves them alone?
Sorry?
Are there any violations for, fake news or penalties for?
Not yet regulated about this in Japan.
Okay. I think it's the same in the Philippines. Attorney Arnel.
Well, in the case of the Philippines, we have an old law which punishes the misuse of publication, and the law says that fake news is punishable only when it endangers public order. Okay, so if it does not endanger the public order, then it is a protected speech.
Can you give examples, attorney? What endangers public order?
Well, I don't want to use this as an example. Remember that case of that person who, for example, if I will not give an actual case. For example, I will publish an article, and I will tell that the president is or this person is ugly, when in fact he is not ugly. Okay, that's a fake news. Okay, because it does not contain truthful information. Now, if it does not endanger, meaning the public order will still be maintained, despite the publication of a fake news, then that is not punishable.
Okay.
Okay.
So there are actually a lot of similarities and with the Japan law when it comes to freedom of expression. I mean, the Philippines and Japan actually have similarities, a bit of differences, but also a lot of similarities.
I believe so, because this is a universal human right as declared by the United Nations. And again, this is not a grant of right. It's a recognition that that right is existing, and it coexists with us as a human being, right? So if there are any laws passed by Congress, it's not a grant of that right, but merely to regulate the speech, okay? The right to free speech, okay? And we have a lot in the Philippines, but this regulation does not pertain to the speech itself, okay? Because that's the essence of freedom of speech. What is being regulated here regulated by our laws in the Philippines is more on the manner, the time, or the place of the exercise of that right. Okay, for example, we have in the Philippines a public demonstration is very ordinary. Okay, so we if not for this pandemic, we can see a lot of demonstrations along the streets, no? But the demonstrators are free to do that, okay? But it doesn't mean that the government cannot regulate the manner by which they will exercise that right, right? So government may regulate the place of the demonstration. That's why we have these designated areas where people can hold a public assembly. They cannot just hold their rallies anywhere as they please, because that would cause disturbance. Okay, so we call this in the law as a content neutral regulation because it is not the content of the speech that is being regulated, and that is perfectly valid. Okay, but if what is being regulated is the content of the speech itself, okay, so for example, you want you dictate the reporter on what to say, and that is already censorship. Okay, that is not allowed because you are already regulating the content of the speech itself. Okay, I hope that that's an additional information.
Yes, that's very good, attorney. So censorship is a direct violation of freedom of expression.
Yes, yes, and that is what the Constitution actually is protecting. Okay, prior restraint or censorship and subsequent punishment, because of course it would be useless to exercise your freedom of speech if you will be punished subsequently, correct? For uttering that speech. So the Constitution guarantees the free exercise of that right against prior restraint or censorship and subsequent punishment.
Okay, thank you, attorney. Attorney Kaneko, is it the same in Japan? Do you have, is censorship also considered a violation of freedom of expression?
You asked me if government violate the freedom of expression, what will be happen, right?
Yes, attorney.
If government violate the freedom of expression, the law and the act of administration will be null and void, right? So, but unfortunately, there are no cases of the Supreme Court which decided the law and act of administration is unconstitutional. So so I want to ask for the Attorney Arnel if there are some cases of the Supreme Court which judge the infringing the freedom of expression.
Yeah, we have cases here, right? And it's the same effect if the law, if the government infringes upon the exercise of freedom of expression, then that act would be declared null and void. If, for example, if the Congress pass a law which would infringe the freedom of expression, then that law, or at least that portion of the law, may be declared null and void. Now, okay, so you remember there was a case of a church in Visayas. They put a poster doon sa church, on the church, no? Team Patay and Team Buhay, remember? Now, and I think if I remember correctly, the government, or at least an agent of the government, took those posters down or tarpaulin down. Okay, the Supreme Court held that that is unconstitutional and that infringes the freedom of expression. Okay, now so that's one consequence if the right of or if the freedom of expression is infringed. The other remedy of the person whose freedom of expression is violated, we have this provision in the Civil Code of the Philippines, particularly in Article 23. Okay, if the freedom, there is a list of rights mentioned in that law, and among which is a freedom of expression. Okay, if a person's right to freedom of expression or any other rights mentioned therein is violated by either public officer or even private individual, the person may claim damages. Okay, may file a case in court and claim damages as a relief. Okay, that's another remedy available under our law.
Okay, so I think that's the difference between the Philippine law and the Philippine experience and the Japan experience, that we have Supreme Court cases or Supreme Court decisions on freedom of expression, unlike Japan. So, thank you so much, Attorney Arnel and Attorney Kaneko. Let's move on now to
You're welcome.
To Ms. Roma for the second question.
Thank you so much, Ms. Florence. And thank you so much for your legal opinions, Attorney Arnel and Attorney Kaneko. We are learning a lot today. And now that we know what freedom of expression really means, and we already understood that even though we have this freedom of expression, it is not an absolute right. And we also understand the differences and similarities between Japan and Philippines. And now let's move on to our second question. For our second question, what are the reasons or legal basis for a broadcast company to be shut down? Please share your knowledge about this, Attorney Arnel.
Okay. First, remember that before a broadcast company may be able to operate, it must have a franchise coming from the government. Okay. And that congressional franchise is actually a law. Okay, it is actually a law. And the franchise may contain grounds for terminating the franchise, and therefore the franchise may be shut down. Okay, for example, in case there's in one franchise that I read, actually the franchise of ABS-CBN, there's a provision there that in case the program, let me just take a look at it again. Okay. 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 So, in case a portion of the show, for example, or the broadcast or telecast, would show something that would propose or incite treason or sedition or indecency or immorality, the network, the broadcast company, should cut it off. Okay. Otherwise, that may be a cause for the closure or cancellation of the franchise. And you know, the consequence of the franchise when canceled is there's no franchise, then the broadcast company will lose its right to, you know, to operate. Okay, that's one ground. Second ground, possible ground, is just like the case of ABS-CBN. The franchise of ABS-CBN expired last May 4. Okay, by operation of law, by May 5, it ceased to exist. Therefore, it has no more right to operate. Okay. Another possible ground is that before, well, congressional franchise is one of the requirements, but that is not all. No, because you have to, the broadcast company have to secure a permit from the National Telecommunications Commission before it can actually operate. So there are two legal documents, no, the franchise and this permit from the NTC. Without that permit, the broadcast company can also not operate, and therefore it's a ground for cancellation of the franchise, and therefore it's a ground for closing its operation. Now, those are the grounds that I've seen, or at least can be implied with, or can be read on the franchise. Now, what other grounds? No, well, you know that the operation of and management and the ownership of mass media, no, for example, a TV network or radio station, it must be owned 100% by Filipino. Okay. In case of advertising companies, no, because advertising companies are also they also, these are related activities, correct? And they utilize a lot, they exercise a lot of their freedom of expression, commercial speech. No, under the Constitution, advertising companies must be owned at least 70% by Filipino. Only 30% may be owned by foreigner, something like that. Okay. So if this fundamental requirement is violated, then that is a ground um, to invalidate the franchise. Now, if you notice, all these grounds have nothing to do with the content of the speech. Okay, these have nothing to do with what the exercise of free speech. Okay, but these grounds relate to the business of the company. Okay, just like any business, you have to comply with certain requirements, right? And again, these grounds have nothing to do with the content, what would be uttered by the broadcast company, what would be shown. Well, there's no restriction on that. Okay, so those are the possible grounds for shutting down or for the closure of a broadcast company. Of course, due process must be observed during the implementation of the closure or before a company will be closed. But for me, my opinion is that when the franchise expired, there's no need for a hearing, because by operation of law, the franchise already expired, so there's no need to hear. Okay, there's no more need to listen to the other party, to the broadcast company, why the franchise should not be cancelled, because there's no more franchise to speak of in the first place because it already expired. Okay, that's my opinion. Okay.
So from
and
my
that's the reason, and that was. Yeah, please, Roma, please.
I'm sorry, and just continue.
So and that's the reason. In the case of ABS-CBN, the operation of ABS-CBN was stopped simply because its franchise is already expired. If it's expired, then there's more reason to operate. There's no more basis at all, right?
Okay, so from what I understood, attorney, so the government has the power to shut down a broadcasting company because there are certain rules to be followed, such as the citizenship rule. And as what you've said, that the broadcasting company should be owned or managed by 70% Filipino.
Let me correct you. If it's a mass media, it must be 100% owned and managed by a Filipino. If it's just an advertising company, 70%.
Oh, I see. Okay, I understood. So does it mean, attorney, that ABS-CBN closure constitutional or non-constitutional?
Well, if we are talking about the cease and desist order of the of the NTC, that is constitutional. Okay, because that is incumbent upon the NTC to issue that order, because there's no more franchise. Okay, but remember that there is a quo warranto petition filed by the government before the Supreme Court sometime in February or March. The ground there is the purpose of the quo warranto is actually to question the ABS situation for violating the fundamental law, which is the ownership of the shares of stocks. Because allegedly, some foreigners own shares of stocks, or they have at least financial interest in ABS-CBN. And the other ground alleged in the petition is that ABS-CBN violated the franchise because the ABS-CBN violated the franchise when what's this, the Capamilya black box. Okay, allegedly that is not covered by the franchise. Okay, that's the allegation. Well, since this is pending in court, I don't want to discuss the matter because we are bound by the sub judice rule, no? And sub judice rule is actually a limitation, okay, of the exercise of free expression. We cannot discuss the merits of a case which is already pending before any court. No? So I will have to, to refrain from making any comment on that matter.
I understood, attorney. But does the shutdown of ABS-CBN then violate the freedom of expression?
As I've said, the closure of ABS-CBN is based on the expiration of its franchise. As simple as that. Okay, so there is only a violation of freedom of expression if what you regulate is the content of your speech, of your utterance. Okay, here what is being regulated here is the nature or the manner by which you exercise your right. Okay, in fact, ABS-CBN is still airing its programs, I believe, through online platform, right? TV Patrol, for example, is continuously showing over the internet. No, in fact, some personalities, talents of ABS-CBN have been very vocal in social media, so they are not being prevented from talking, from expressing their opinion, from airing their grievances about the closure. They are not prohibited. They are free to express their grievances, etc. No, but have you noticed that no one from ABS-CBN is talking? No, because of the sub judice rule, I believe. Okay, so we cannot discuss. They cannot discuss, especially them, because they are parties to the case. No, and that's a very basic. No, there's a gag rule there. It's very basic that you cannot make any comment regarding the merits of the case which is pending in any court.
Okay, I understood, attorney. Thank you so much for that information. And one more thing, there's also a statement released by the House of Representatives last Wednesday to pass a bill giving ABS-CBN a temporary license to go back on air for 5 months. And this is what they call the provisional franchise. Are there like legal or strict conditions or legal measures to be followed for this provisional franchise, and who will approve this temporary license?
Okay, let's go back to what happened to ABS-CBN. But there was a statement under oath by the NTC that they will issue provisional authority only to issue a cease and desist order last May 5, correct? Okay, and that and even both houses of House of Representatives and the Senate issued a resolution requesting the National Telecommunications Commission to issue a provisional authority to operate. Okay. Now, is that valid? No, because the resolution is not a law. Again, going back to what I've said, a franchise is a law. A resolution is not a law. So it was perfectly legal for NTC to issue that cease and desist order. Okay, now what happened now? A bill was passed, and I believe it already went through second reading. No, a bill which would grant ABS-CBN a provisional license or a provisional franchise to be able to operate until October 31. Well, just like any law, a franchise has to be passed 3 readings, and there's a requirement for a passage of a law. One is it must undergo 3 readings on separate days. Okay, what happened? Well, if you followed the news, I believe the first and second reading was not done on separate days. No, I was checking. I am checking if my my understanding is correct, because when I saw the news, it was already on. The news already said that it already passed the second reading, and one more reading is scheduled, I believe, next week or this week. I don't know. Right now, assuming that the first and second reading was done on one single day, then that may be a constitutional ground against that bill. Okay, that might be a constitutional against that law if passed into law. Okay, assuming that the process will was complied with, it underwent 3 readings on separate days. It doesn't stop there, because um, House of Representative is only one half of the Congress, correct? So it must be forwarded to the Senate, and the Senate might amend, might um, totally disregard it and pass a totally new bill. We don't know. That's discretionary on the part of the Congress. No, even the court cannot dictate what the Congress is supposed to do. So and if the bill is passed, both houses of Congress agreed, they have to the enrolled bill will have to be forwarded to the president for his signature. Now another challenge will be might it might face another challenge there, no, because we don't know, because the president vetoed several bills before. We don't know. Okay. Now the question is 5. Okay, no, that's a totally discretionary on the part of the Congress, because that is a regulation on the not on the content of the speech. It's a so it's not an infringement, but it's a very short period. No, that's a discretionary on the part of the Congress. Okay, so that's my opinion.
Okay, understood. Thank you so much, attorney. But I'm just curious. Was there an incident before or in the past that there was also a shutdown of TV or radio or broadcast companies, and for what ground?
I'm not aware of any similar situation that happened before. Okay, and if you read the news or monitored the news, the contention of not only ABS-CBN but also the Congress is that there were previous cases wherein the NTC allowed a broadcast company to operate despite the lapse of the franchise, provided the is already a pending application for the renewal of the franchise. Okay, and that is what ABS-CBN and Congress is holding on, right? In one congressional hearing before the Senate, NTC mentioned that there were previous cases wherein they allowed a broadcast company to operate despite the lapse of their franchise, but to shut down totally a broadcast company, I'm not aware of any but I read one case. It's a case of a radio station in somewhere in Isabela, I think. If I read the case correctly, if I understood it correctly, a radio station was not allowed to operate because of an issue on its business permit. Something like that. But that is local government issue, not the NTC.
Mm, okay. This will be my last question. Just like on the lighter or a simpler note, is this like almost the same? This kind of franchise lapses, is it almost the same with the process when it comes to leasing procedures, like in real estate, when your contract expired and you want to have some renewal?
Okay, it depends on the contract, right? There are contract of lease that would provide a holdover clause.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, a typical arrangement is that once the of course the general agreement is that once the lease contract expires, there's no tacit renewal, there's no automatic renewal. But once the lease expires, the lessee, the tenant, may be subjected to some sort of penalties by paying a higher amount of rent. Okay, that is uh, a typical arrangement in a lease contract. But what if there's no agreement to that effect? May the lessee continue? Of course, they may continue. Well, but he has to face the consequence of a case may be filed against him for eviction. No, but in the case of broadcast company, a typical franchise would not there's no express um, stipulation in this franchise about automatic renewal or even at least a holdover clause. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
that's why one senator passed a bill. Actually, I think it's Senator Drilon passed a bill to to the effect that there would be a holdover period, no, as long as the application for renewal has been passed, the uh, the franchise holder, the grantee, or the broadcast company may continue to operate. It is as if the franchise is renewed for a certain period of time. Of course, this is still subject to the renewal of the franchise. It may be valid only for a limited period. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and there's a big difference. Actually, a lease contract is a private commercial agreement, whereas this franchise is impressed with public interest. That's the main difference.
Wow. Thank you so much, attorney. We're learning a lot from you. Well, I guess we have one question from Miss Florence.
Okay, attorney, just a quick question. Going back to the provisional franchise for 5 months that is being heard now in both houses. Why do you think they have to do that? I mean, we know that the process for passing a bill is quite long, right? So why do they have to give a 5-month franchise instead of another 25 years? Wouldn't that be faster and can settle this issue with less damages from all sides?
Well, I would assume that since the nature of the franchise is a mere provisional franchise, they may rush it, right? It's a congressional prerogative. Because what I understand is that the reason for the delay, sorry for the word, if there's indeed a delay, is that there are certain issues that must be discussed, and there is an oppositor for the renewal of the franchise. A group of cable operators are opposing for the renewal of the franchise of ABS-CBN. So Congress might need a lot of time in order to discuss and deliberate on these matters. And take note, the Congress has how many days more, session days more before they will go on recess, and they will be back by the SONA, July, right? And during that period, normally Congress is very busy on budget deliberation. Okay, normally July, August, September, the Congress is very busy deliberating about the budget next year, and it would be very. I'm assuming that it would be very hard discussion this time because of the pandemic. The government needs money, so it would be really they would really need a lot of time discussing the budget. So in order to give way to ABS-CBN for it to operate, at least temporarily, they I think they will just give 5 months provisional franchise. Well, that might be extended. I mean, the Congress might amend it because it's not yet approved. The Senate might want a longer provisional franchise, right? So this is totally discretionary on the part of the Congress. Okay, we cannot question that actually.
Okay, wow. Wow. There's a lot of clarifications right now, and I guess we're like slowly understanding all the details, specific details about ABS-CBN shutdown. But then thank you so much, Attorney, for enlightening us. Now let's proceed to the third question with Ms. Florence.
Okay, so let's move to Japan this time. Thank you, Attorney Arnel.
Thank you. Welcome.
First question. Okay, if a broadcasting company will be shut down or suspended in Japan, what could be the problem and its legal basis? Please share your knowledge with us, Attorney Kaneko.
Okay, so please open my slide.
There you go.
Okay. Okay, so first of all, I will let you know the summary of my answer to the question. Primarily, the question is, under what basis may the Japanese government suspend the broadcast station, and what are the possible legal repercussions or problems that may arise from such action of the Japanese government? First, the legal basis for suspension of a broadcasting company in Japan is provided in the broadcasting law and radio law. Legal problems from such action of the government could arise in instances involving, first, the government's right to refuse the application for renewal of franchise, and second, the issue of freedom of expression. Please note that Japanese government cares about freedom of speech and takes balance between the needs for regulation and human rights. In Japan, in order to secure human rights, it has been considered that it's important to discuss and make common theories between professors, politicians, and the government. That is because once they made common theory, it is difficult to change and take action which is violating such theory. Okay, so please next page. So let's move to legal basis. In Japan, it is necessary to obtain a franchise license from an administrative agency in order to establish a broadcasting station. In Japan, this agency is the Ministry of Internal Affairs. In addition, the franchise license is fixed for a period of time, and when the period expires, they have to get a renewal franchise. In the Philippines, as Mr. Arnel said, a franchise is granted through a legislative act by Congress, right? In addition, contrary to the Philippines, in Japan, the administrative department has the power to franchise and renewal. Of course, the department has administrative discretion, but the degree of the discretion is narrower than Congress. Then, it is also stipulated that if a broadcast station violates any provision of these laws, the operation of the broadcast station may be suspended, revoked, or other restriction may be imposed. For example, Article 4 stipulates the standards for making programs. Let me read some part of the article. Article 4 A broadcaster must comply with the following when editing domestic broadcast programs. 1. It must not negatively influence public safety or good morals. 2. It must be politically fair. 3. Reporting must not distort the fact. And 4. It must clarify the point at issue from as many angles as possible where there are conflicting opinions concerning an issue. And then Article 76 of the radio law stipulates that in the event of violation of the broadcast law, the operation of broadcast station may be suspended, revoked, or other restrictions may be imposed. Okay, so let's move to the next page.
So when it comes attorney getting a license, what are the requirements in broadcasting franchise renewal in Japan? Are the requirements for relicensing and new licensing applications exactly the same?
Okay. So let's move to the issue of relicenses. Okay, so in Japan, as in the Philippines, it is necessary to obtain a license from an administrative agency in order to establish a broadcasting station. And similar to the Philippines, broadcasters in Japan are required to apply for renewal when the term of the franchise has expired. In this regard, as I write on the slide, there are academic discussions and debates on the matter. Broadcasters use a large amount of funds to establish broadcast station, and it is an issue as to whether or not the requirement and standards are exactly the same as those of new applicants who intend to enter the market. Is it same between first-time applicant and renewal applicant, even though renewal applicant already used huge amount? In Japan, there are two views or series. First, as a common theory, the broadcaster's franchise license does not give any vested interest to existing broadcasters, and the requirement and the standards are the same as those for new applicants. The main reason for the common theory is the scarcity of the radio waves. Second, on the contrary, we have the famous opinion stating that existing broadcasting stations will not be deprived of their license to broadcast unless there are special and outstanding reasons, and their licenses will be renewed and granted renewal franchise. In Japan, there are no cases involving such kind of matter, but if such case is filed, government submit the opinion of common theory, and broadcast companies submit the famous opinion. I don't know which opinion is adopted, but I think it could be considered about the view of famous opinion because such opinion thinking is rational. Therefore, in Japan, the applicant of renewal could be considered to be preferred position than a first-time applicant. In my opinion, the discretion of the government is narrower for the first-time applicant than the applicant for renewal. Okay, so let's move to next page. Okay, so let's move to the freedom of expression. The Article 4 I mentioned before described that broadcasters should pay attention when creating programs. And if they violate this law, they may be punished, suspended, and be revoked. However, as mentioned above, freedom of expression is secured under the Constitution. So it is said that the production of programs should primarily be based on autonomy of broadcaster. Therefore, the requirement for the suspension of the operation of broadcasting station for violation of this act is disputed by many professors and government and politicians. Presently, it is commonly and practically recognized that suspensions may only be imposed when any of these requirements are present. First, it is obvious that the programs were broadcasted in contrary to the law. Second, such broadcasting programs harm the public interest and it is contrary to the purpose of the broadcast law or the radio law, and it shall be necessary to prevent them in the future. Third, it is recognized that if a specific business operator repeatedly causes an unwarranted such situation and the self-regulation measures exercised by the broadcasting business operator to prevent a recurrence are not sufficient in compliance with this act.
Very
So,
interesting.
it is the effect of the freedom of expression. As I said, the freedom of expression is not absolute right, and it's to the extent that the exercise of the freedom does not interfere the public welfare.
Right.
Government should consider the balance of them. This binding effect limitation is the example of this.
It seems that in Japan, you really take freedom of expression seriously, and that before you can shut down a broadcasting company, it will be, very clear legal basis and reasons for that. So with that in mind, do you have a similar case, or did you have a similar case like the ABS-CBN shutdown in Japan, and how did it end?
In Japan, I don't recall any instance when an expired license or a license which was about to expire was not renewed. As I said, application for renewal of license are usually renewed because of the narrow discretion exercised by the administrative agency. Also, in Japan, there are not many cases involving the revocation due to violation of the law. In 1993, an incident called the Tsubaki Incident occurred. This is a case in which Mr. Tsubaki, a director of TV Asahi, he said that he intended to prevent the administration of the particular political party and to support the organization of the government of another political party. In response to this, the government carefully examined revocation of the broadcasting license due to violation of the broadcast law, but finally only gave administrative guidance. It is said that government only do guidance because of the constitution, freedom of press.
In the Philippines, Attorney Kaneko, a broadcasting franchise lasts for 25 years. Is it the same in Japan?
In Japan, 5 years, but almost all company is renewed again.
Okay. So I'm curious, Attorney Kaneko, can the Japanese government revoke the license or refuse to give a license to a politically biased broadcasting company, for example?
So in the past?
Yes, or is there a legal basis for that?
Yes, there is a many ground. It's stipulated in the broadcasting law and radio law. So there is a similar grounds of the foreign investment regulations and the directors past history, the criminal history, or like that. So it's stipulated.
Okay. Tony, are you still there?
Hello?
Yes. Okay, so are you saying that it's possible to revoke a broadcasting license or refuse to renew the franchise in Japan?
Okay, so based on the foregoing in Japan, I believe that it is impossible to revoke a broadcasting license or refuse to renew or franchise unless certain conditions are met. More concretely, on a case-by-case basis, depending on the reason, basically, we have to consider the balance between the right to freedom of the press and right to know of citizens and reason to restrict. I think this is limited to cases where I already mentioned before, only programs that are obviously infringing the law and have continued to do broadcasting the same thing, despite many warnings from the government could be restricted. In my opinion, the broadcasting stations must fully recognize their position as having a strong influence on the people's right to know. If they are to report on politically contentious discussions, I believe that they should be careful enough to enable the people to form their free political ideas, and they must not force the people to have biased knowledge and specific political ideas, such as by giving them the opportunity to refute it, by fully taking into account the ideas from a different standpoint, by giving the other side an opportunity to explain.
You mentioned warnings, attorney. So
Yeah.
that means that if a broadcasting company has some violations, the government will issue warnings first to that company before the process of shutting it down.
I think it's the due process.
Let me ask Attorney Arnel. Attorney, what do you think of the Japan situation, or the Japan way of franchising or renewing? I think that's the better term, of franchises compared to the Philippines. Do you have any comments?
Again, this grant of franchise, whether it's a new application or renewal, is a act of Congress, and this is highly political. No? It's a numbers game in the House of Representatives, and I think that's the major difference between the two countries. I mean, with respect to the regulation, it's a very political undertaking, a very political process. Okay?
In Japan, Attorney Kaneko, your Ministry of Information, right, and Internal Affairs and Information is the one regulating the media or the press. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's correct.
Here in the Philippines, we have the National Telecommunications Commission. Is that similar?
It's a similar. The internal Department of Internal Affairs, or like that.
Oh, it's a Department of Internal Affairs.
And telecommunication, like that. I forgot the English name.
Attorney Arnel, would you know why not the NTC? Why don't they be the one to give the franchise or renewal instead of it being a bill in Congress, which takes more time and instead becomes a very political exercise instead of a legal one?
Well, first, remember that this is a constitutional provision. So the Congress cannot just pass a law which would wherein they would delegate their powers to grant the franchise to any other government agency. Okay, since this is a power of the Congress as stated in the Constitution, for them to do that, for them to be able to delegate that would require an amendment of the Constitution. Okay, and that's a very difficult process. We never had a case of an amendment of our Constitution, at least this 1987 Constitution. There were attempts to amend the Constitution, but none was successful. Second, maybe the reason why this is given to the Congress under the Constitution is for check and balances. For check and balances. Okay. Again, this is a political business. Familiarities in in the NTC, there might be familiarities already among personalities, and the only way to control that, any consequence of that familiarity thing, I hope you understand what I meant by that, is for another agency of the government to counter check it. Okay. So, and I think that's the reason why it is reserved to the Congress.
Okay. Attorney Kaneko, back to you.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you are also familiar with the ABS-CBN shutdown issue, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes. Do you have any legal opinion or comments on that, or the process of renewal comparing it to Japan, for example?
Compared to Japan, if it will be happen in Japan, maybe government has to renewal because of the theory I mentioned in the discussion. But it is difficult. But I've heard the ABS-CBN has a other channel, right? The cable and
yes, they actually have 10,
internet.
10 channels and cable channels. They have radio stations as well. FM and AM.
Yeah, and maybe I think there is the same ground of the citizenship and the tax matter to the other channel also, right?
Yeah.
So I want to ask Mr. Arnel, does the government has a power to shut down not only the antenna, the antenna channel, but also the cable and through the internet?
I think that's part of their franchise. That's why Sky Cable, for example, is also closed, right? All of the cable channels, the TV channels, radio stations covered by their franchise. Actually, there is a list provided. I am not so sure. They are covered by one franchise. So all of these radio stations, TV stations, cable channels, which are included in the cease and desist order, those are the ones closed. And I believe right now what ABS-CBN is doing is to operate at least their news programs, is to operate what is via online platforms. Is that the question, Mr.
Yeah.
Is that the?
So for now, now the cable and the internet channel is broadcasting or already suspended?
I think your question the internet, they're allowed. The ABS news is not part of the franchise, right, Attorney Arnel? That's why they're allowed to broadcast.
The internet, internet is not covered because well, when the franchise was granted or when the Constitution was ratified in 1987, the internet was not yet existing, so it might not be contemplated. And internet is not, the grant of franchise is for the use of frequency, okay, radio frequency, and this radio frequency is owned by the government, and that's the reason why there's a need for the issuance of a franchise. And internet is more or less a public domain, I would say, and it is not owned by the government. That's why no congressional franchise is needed.
Okay, so the regarding to the internet channel, it's not the Congress matter, it's an NTC matter, right? Maybe
it's not
franchise.
Franchise matter, yes.
Not covered by the franchise. Attorneys Arnel and Attorney Kaneko, I'm so sorry, but we are running out of time. So
Okay.
this is a very interesting discussion. And let us now move on to the question and answer part. So we have some guests in our audience who would like to ask a question. So to those who will be asking questions, please state your name. And if it is for someone specific, kindly say so. So let's begin with our first audience. Give me a second. I don't see the name. Miss Roma, can you
I'm sorry?
help with the names of the ones asking questions?
Oh, okay. One moment. Let me have here. I guess it's from one of the representatives from the fan club of Miss Kimchi.
Oh yes, we have Miss
Uh-huh.
Kim's fans club here.
Yeah, fans club here. I guess we have one moment. I have here the name. Just give me one sec. So we have here Mr. Joey Pasqua and Mr. Danilo Santiago. Mm-hmm.
Calling Mr. Joey Pasqua. Are you there?
I guess we already had their question.
Okay.
Yeah, we already have their question. I guess the first question is that you can answer if Mr. Attorney Arnel or Attorney Kaneko. For the first question, ABS-CBN applied for renewal in 2014, which was denied because of FICTAP's opposition. Why waited and did nothing from 2015 to 2019 to fix the application?
Sorry, there's a technical difficulty. I did not get the question. Kindly repeat.
Okay, I repeat the question. ABS-CBN applied for renewal.
Hello?
Can you hear me, attorney?
Yes, please.
Okay, so I repeat. ABS-CBN applied for renewal in 2014, which was denied because of FICTAP's opposition. Why waited and did nothing from 2015 to 2019 to fix the application?
Well, the best person to answer that is the Congress, correct? So I cannot answer that because I don't know the reason why Congress did not act upon the renewal application way back in 2016, 2014, I believe. Okay, so that question should be addressed to the Congress because again, the approval of any application, whether it's a new application or a renewal, is discretionary on the part of the Congress. So I'm sorry, I cannot answer that question.
Okay, no problem, sir. Okay, no problem, attorney.
We have Mr. Danilo in the room now. Mr. Danilo, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Santiago, there you go. Good afternoon, sir. Please go ahead with your question.
Hi, good afternoon. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Attorney Arnel and Attorney Kaneko. It's an honor to me to join this kind of activities, ma'am. I'm also a fan of official member of this team too. In behalf of my fellow fans, this is our question. Many are raising the issue of why canceling it now in midst of crisis. Just justification for violating the law. Hello? Do you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, sir. Sir Danilo, can you repeat the question for Attorney Arnel?
Okay. Good afternoon, Attorney Arnel. Good afternoon, everyone. In behalf of my fellow fans club, here is our question. Many are raising issue of canceling it now in midst of crisis. Is a justification for violating the law?
Oh, I think, Attorney, the question of Mr. Danilo is there's a lot of issues of the cancellation. You know, why do it now when there's a crisis? So he's asking if there is a justification for such violation, if you might call it that. I think his question.
I'm sorry, I did not get the entire question. There's a technical problem right now. The internet connection is erratic. Kindly repeat the problem.
Hello.
The problem in the question.
There's a many raising issue of why canceling it now. The rise of prices as a justification for violating the law.
Okay, did you hear that, attorney?
What law was violated? Can you clarify what law was violated?
It's mice of crisis, sir. Crisis.
Hello, Mr. Santiago.
In the midst of crisis, is that what you're saying, Mr. Danilo?
Well, you
about.
Go ahead, Sir Danilo.
In mice of prices is justification of violating the law.
Okay, let me just clarify the question, sir, because I think what he's really asking is the timing. Why cancel it now in the midst of crisis? I think that's what he's trying to ask.
Yeah. Well, I think I heard that he mentioned about a violation of the law. Therefore, I was asking for a clarification. What law was violated? Or what law is he referring to?
Mr. Danilo, are you referring to a specific law that was violated, or are you asking about the timing?
About the timing, about what happening now, but why it's canceling it now.
Yes. I think that's his question.
Well, again, that is discretionary on the part of it's not even discretionary on the part of NTC. NTC was just implementing the law. Okay, the franchise of ABS-CBN already expired, so there's nothing. There's no more reason, or there's no more justification for their continued operation, because if the franchise already, there's no more basis for their operation. There's no basis for the NTC to issue any provisional authority as being requested by the Congress. Okay. Now the timing, with respect to the timing, I'm sorry, I cannot really answer that, because perhaps NTC has a good reason why they shut down. They issued that cease and desist order despite the crisis, no. But legally speaking, there was no violation. Okay, there's no violation.
Does that answer your question, Mr. Danilo?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the wonderful answer.
Thank you, sir. Is there another one from the audience who would like to ask a question? No more questions? Miss Roma, are you there?
Oh yeah, I'm here. I guess we have one more question. You can anyone can answer this. So Attorney Arnel or Attorney Kaneko, what is your take in granting ABS-CBN provisional authority to operate?
Well, I will answer, not as a lawyer, but an ordinary person. Well, ABS-CBN has been an institution, right? And it's been together with the other broadcast company, ABS-CBN has been I would say, a partner of the government in providing information to the public. Okay. Personally, I don't watch other shows of ABS-CBN. I only watch news, and in this regard, I join the sentiments of a lot that the franchise should be renewed. And Congress have to act on the renewal. Now, in the interim, I would really appreciate, personally speaking, if the Congress can pass the provisional franchise of ABS-CBN in order for, on top of the existing broadcast company, we have other platforms wherein we can get information. Okay, so I support the renewal of ABS-CBN franchise.
Okay, thank you so much, Attorney Arnel. Ms. Florence, are there any other more questions from our audience?
Yes, I think there's a question from YouTube. So the question is, in the same application that was made in 2014, it includes 6 more channels, including ANC and Mix, which should have been applied as new separate franchises. Why use the same airwaves for the said 6 channels without their separate franchises? Do you have an answer to this, Attorney Arnel?
Well, that is a very technical issue. I'm an accountant by profession, lawyer by profession, so I cannot really answer that very technical problem. No, perhaps if I am a communications engineer, I would be able to answer that. I'm sorry, I cannot answer that.
Okay. Yes, because I believe if I may comment on that question, for one franchise you can actually have several channels. So it's not the franchise is on the airwave, not on the channel. So I believe I heard that
Correct.
Senate committee hearing. So there you go. One last question here, Attorney Arnel. What do you think of the letter that was sent by Solicitor General Kalida to the NTC that seems to have intimidated them to send a cease and desist order to ABS-CBN? Do you think that had an effect on the NTC's decision?
I think that is part of the petition filed by ABS-CBN. Remember that after the cease and desist order were implemented, ABS-CBN filed a petition for certiorari prohibition to the Supreme Court, questioning that cease and desist order. And I think, and I believe, I have not read the contents of the petition. I'm not privy to it. That letter, I think, was mentioned in that petition. So since this is already a subject matter of a pending case before the Supreme Court, we cannot discuss the merits of that, as we are bound by sub judice rule. I'm sorry, I cannot make any comment on that.
That's right. So since it's an ongoing case, we cannot really comment much on that anymore. So Ms. Roma, this has been a very interesting topic. Would you think so too?
Oh, yes, totally. I agree with you. So it's a very heated discussion with our audience. However, as what you mentioned, as what Ms. Florence mentioned, we are short in time. So I guess it's time for us, or it's time for me to restate the main points of the discussion. I will be giving you the summary of everything that we have discussed today. So the first one, in the Philippines, the Constitution didn't clearly define freedom of expression. However, it is a universal law that people have the right to express their opinion. However, it is not absolute. In Japan, secondly, in Japan, Article 13 guarantees the right to freedom of expression as long as it doesn't interfere with the public welfare. Thirdly, both countries has their own law to broadcasting, both countries has their own law that broadcasting company must follow to obtain and renew their franchise. If they violate it, the company may be suspended or shut down. And lastly, in the Philippines, Congress and NTC have the power to give franchise and renewal, while in Japan, it's the administrative department. So those are the takeaways and the important details or points that we have discussed in our today's talk show or today's salon. But then let's move on with our final messages from our guests. So we would love to hear some words from our dear guests. Let's first have Attorney Kaneko. Let's have your final message for this session.
Thank you, everyone. It was my honor to attend this discussion. I enjoyed the discussion so much. I also had a chance to study myself and comparison between the Philippines law and the Japanese law. I hope this discussion and knowledge today will be helpful to you, everyone, to make opinion and expression. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Attorney Kaneko. How about, yes, thank you. How about
Thank you.
Attorney Arnel? Yes, thank you so much. Attorney Arnel?
Well, thank you. It's a privilege to be a part of this discussion, and I hope that I was able to impart some knowledges, some information, at least my very little understanding about the subject matter, because again, I'm not a practitioner in this field. No, I'm a tax lawyer. Yeah, but at least I was able to impart some information about the subject matter. I hope it helped. I hope that yes, it helped, and I was able to convey clearly what our constitution and other laws provides on the subject matter. And again, it's a privilege to be part of this discussion. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, Attorney Arnel. The pleasure is ours. We really learned a lot from you and from Attorney Kaneko, from everything that we've discussed today. It was really a lot of enlightenment and clarifications from this latest news that we have this time. But of course, I would love also to hear from my guest co-host, Miss Florence.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, and I would like to thank our two speakers. You've been very, very helpful. Attorney Arnel, thank you so much. And Attorney Kaneko, thank you for your time. And
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
okay, so as we end this session, I would just like to leave you with this thought of the day from Evelyn Beatrice Hall, the biographer of Voltaire. She said, "I disapprove of what you say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it." Again, this is Florence.
Right.
Okay, thank you so much, Miss Florence. Well, ladies and gentlemen, and to our dear viewers, a lot of relevant and useful information and clarifications discussed, and a lot to take. However, I suppose we have a clearer picture now about this latest issue our country is facing aside from this world pandemic. It's absolutely important to be well informed before getting yourself involved for a better and a more balanced freedom of expression. Well, to our dear viewers and to everyone, thank you so much to our guests for today and to everyone who joined us, including, of course, our technical staff. This will not be possible without each of you. And we're looking forward to seeing you again to our next online salon. Thank you for watching us, and please don't forget to leave a comment and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And once again, this is Miss Roma. For now, keep safe, everyone, and thank you so much to my guest co-host and to Attorney Arnel and Attorney Kaneko.